This video is about World War II veteran Joe Toye, who was part of Easy Company, the group made famous by the book and miniseries Band of Brothers. And I've been able to include, I think for the first time, actual audio of Joe talking a little bit about his time in the service. I don't think that's ever been shared before, publicly. So I couldn't make this video without the help of the volunteers at the Air Mobility Command Museum in Dover, Delaware, and Joe's sons, Steve and George. They were huge. They were a huge help making this video. So as a way to give back, I'm going to donate any revenue attributed directly to this video to a veterans organization. And revenue is generated by you watching ads while the video is running, or making donations while you're watching the video, and also you sharing the video and getting more people to watch it. That's another way you can contribute. And all of that money will be donated to a veterans organization, and I'll give you some details on that when the time comes. So if there was ever a good time for you to watch advertisements on YouTube, this might be it. This video was a true collaborative labor of love, and I really hope you enjoy it. So the aircraft right in front of me basically changed the course of World War II. C-47 Skytrain carried cargo, towed gliders, and dropped paratroopers behind enemy lines. This specific aircraft is called the Turf and Sport Special, and it carried members of the 82nd Airborne to their drop zone just northwest of Saint-Mary-en-Glace, in what would become the most accurate drop of the Normandy invasion. 101st Airborne, however, their story was a little bit different. They were scattered all over the Normandy countryside, primarily because of weather and anti-aircraft fire and the general chaos of war. One of those men was Staff Sergeant Joe Toye of the 101st Airborne 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment, Easy Company. Now, Joe fought in Normandy, and Holland, and Bastogne, and all of those battles that you've probably heard so much about. Along the way, he was awarded 4 Purple Hearts and a Bronze Star. In this video, we're going to take a closer look at this aircraft. Then we're going to follow the footsteps of Joe Toye north to Reading, Pennsylvania. We start here at the Air Mobility Command Museum in Dover, Delaware, on the grounds of the Dover Air Force Base. And we are going to let John, one of the guides here, tell us a little more about this particular C-47.
All aircraft participating in D-Day had those black and white stripes. And essentially they were stripes to identify the aircraft as a friendly aircraft. And that originated about a year prior to D-Day. During Operation Husky, which was the amphibious and airborne invasion of the island of Sicily in the Mediterranean. During the course of that operation, one evening for a resupply mission, a group of planes happened to be C-47s flying over the Allied fleet at night. They were mistaken for German aircraft, and a number of aircraft were shot down. So it was truly a friendly fire incident. So there were over 200 casualties in that episode. In order to avoid that, General Eisenhower ordered all the aircraft to have those black and white stripes. So that's the history of the stripes on the aircraft. So anytime you see an aircraft, whether it's in a book or just depicted on television, if it's got those black and white stripes, it is an aircraft that would have been participating in D-Day. So when you go on a board, just watch your step, watch your head. It's fairly low. The aircraft is pretty steep incline, so be careful walking inside the aircraft. There's some black treads on the floor to help you balance. But feel free to have a seat, and I'll tell you more about the aircraft. The aircraft is famously known for dropping paratroopers, right? So in that configuration, it would carry about around 19 or 20 paratroopers. On D-Day, our aircraft actually dropped 17 paratroopers. As I mentioned, dropped them over St. Mary Glees on D-Day. So in carrying paratroopers, the paratroopers would be in the seats, of course. This door would be physically removed. This door would have been closed because that would have been the cargo door. As the aircraft is approaching the drop zone, the pilot would yell back, and the paratrooper stand up and hook up. What we have here is something called a static line. This is a sample of the material, the nylon material that was used, but this in reality is about 12 or 14 feet long. All right. So this was actually attached to the parachute. So paratroopers would hook this up to this anchor line. This would be hooked up to their parachutes. The parachuters would be standing. They'd be checking each other out to make sure all their equipment was secure. As they approached the drop zone, the red light would come on. The paratroopers would bunch up down here in a line. When the green light came on, they're out the door. Right? So when they jumped out the door, this actually pulled the parachute out of their pack. Right? The reason it was so long is that you didn't want the parachute to deploy as immediately went out the door, because if it did, you could get caught on the tail of the aircraft. So this would allow the paratrooper to actually drop below the aircraft before the parachute deployed. They would have been out of this aircraft fairly quickly. Aircraft would have been flying ideally about 600 feet in the air, going about 100 miles an hour. Depending on weather, depending on ground opposition or air opposition, they may be going a little faster, a little slower, a little higher, a little lower. But the idea is to get out as quickly as possible so they land together. So that's how that worked as well.
So we've headed north now to Reading, Pennsylvania, and I thought a good place to start would be the Reading Pagoda, as you see. From its vantage point, this will give us a good overview of the city, but it seems to be under construction, so this is as close as we're going to get. I still think this is a good place to give you a very brief biography overview of Joe's life and time in the Army. So, Joe Toye was born in Hughstown, Pennsylvania, just north of where we are now, in the heart of Pennsylvania coal mine country. He had to drop out of high school to work in the mines, and following the attack on Pearl Harbor, he enlisted in the Army. Well, that was on December 11th in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. So he completed basic training and was stationed down in the Washington, D.C. area. When he saw an opportunity with the paratroopers for a bigger salary, he seized that opportunity and traveled down to Camp Toccoa in Georgia, and became part of what was to become the famous Easy Company, as depicted in the book and miniseries Band of Brothers. Joe was portrayed by actor Kirk Acevedo in the series. Joe's first combat jump for World War II was behind enemy lines as part of the D-Day invasion and Operation Overlord, specifically Mission Albany, which was the 101st part of Overlord. So now Joe was known amongst the men as being one of the toughest of the tough, and he even injured his hand pretty badly on his parachute rigging even before he hit the ground on D-Day. So the things that he did throughout the war, that's just further evidence of his physical and mental toughness. He was part of the group that took out the 405mm howitzers at Breakcore Banner, and he would continue to serve with Easy Company in Normandy, in Holland, and in Bastogne during the Battle of the Bulge. And he survived more than one grenade blast, which by all rights probably should have taken him out of the war, but it didn't. He ended up with a piece of shrapnel in his right arm on January 1st, 1945, and he could have been medically evacuated then, but he decided to return to his company instead. But finally, on January 3rd, 1945, in the Bastogne area, an artillery barrage sent shrapnel into his back, and another shell landed and took out his right leg. His good friend Wild Bill Guarnere tried to get to him to help, but he was hit as well, and he also lost his right leg. And Joe was only outside of his foxhole to begin with because he was trying to take care of his men, making sure that everyone else was safe. And that just shows the kind of leader that he was. And after that, he spent about 9 months in the hospital, and he eventually was discharged from the Army Hospital in Atlantic City, New Jersey, and he came here to Reading, Pennsylvania, where he worked in several different jobs. The main one being he was a drill bit grinder in the Grace mines for Bethlehem Steel. And that is a job from which he would eventually retire. Joe was married twice and made his life and raised his family here in Reading. He continued to stay in touch with some of the men he served with, including Bill Guarnere, Babe Heffron, and Don Malarkey, who was one of his closest friends. Joe passed away from pancreatic cancer in 1995, and it was Major Richard Winters who delivered his eulogy. He's buried in Gethsemane Cemetery in Laureldale, where we will visit in just a little bit. But first, we're going to follow Joe's footsteps to the location of the Grace Mines in Morgantown, Pennsylvania. So here we are in Morgantown, Pennsylvania, and this is the location of the former Bethlehem Steel Grace Mine. And this building directly in front of us is, I believe, if my research is correct, it used to be the machine shop for Bethlehem Steel. Now, at first I thought that Joe might have worked in the machine shop since his job was a drill bit grinder. But Joe's family tells me that he actually worked down in the mines. So he may not have worked in this building, but I'm sure he was very familiar with it, having worked here a lot of his adult life and then retiring from Bethlehem Steel, I believe in the 1970s, maybe 1977, I think. This is the former location of Bethlehem Steel's Grace Mines. We are now in Reading, PA, actually West Reading, I think, on Sycamore Street, and just up ahead here is the final home of Joe Toye. Now, I say final home, it was actually his home. He bought this house right after he got back from the war, and he lived here the rest of his life, raised his family here, and lived here until he passed away in 1995. So, home of Joe Toye, right up here. Joe married his first wife, Eleanor, known as Ellie, in 1946, just after he got out of the hospital in Atlantic City. And with Eleanor, he had sons Pete, Stephen, Jonathan, and daughter Anita. Joe had a second wife named Mary, and she was known as Betty. They got married in 1966. And the children that Betty brought into the marriage were George, twins Rosemary and Kathleen, and another daughter named Liz. If you do come here to see this place, remember this is a private residence, so please respect the owner's privacy. I'm going to keep my distance here, but did want to take a look at this and show you where Joe Toye lived after the war and up until his death, again, like I said, in 1995. So I'm here now in West Reading, just a few blocks away from Joe's house, Joe's former house. And we're here today to have a little visit with George Vogel, who is technically he's Joe's stepson from Joe's second wife, but George will be the first one to tell you that Joe never used the term stepson. He always called him his son, which says a lot about the kind of person that Joe was. Anyway, so we're going to visit here with George, and He's got a couple of stories to tell us, and also he's got a little bit of a surprise for us when we get in here, something we can share. George,
Yeah.
how are you, buddy?
All right. How about yourself?
It's good to meet you.
You too?
We went every summer up to Canada for a week, for to go fishing, and we can't. I mean, we started out camping in tents, and we had two or three of them set that we'd set up along the site, and there, I remember the one time Joe were walking down to go swimming, to just to jump in the lake and go swimming, and when he did that, Joe had a peg leg that he wore just to get into the water, and he could get in. Once he got in, he actually fit into his stump, and then he had a rope that he just held on to, and then when he got in the water, he took it off. But I walking behind him going down to the lake, and you see people looking at him, and it give a little bit strange looks, and the number of shrapnel wounds on his back was, just incredible to see, and people just kind of were, I don't know, in awe, but that he just did it. And he never considered anything that in his life as a handicap. He always just did it. He never accepted. He didn't get a handicap plate until a placard until he had had a knee replacement in his good leg.
Really?
Yep. Never. Never had, he goes, he was entitled to free hunting and fishing license because of being a disabled vet. Did not accept any of those. Always paid for his way. He goes, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it.
Wow. It says a lot about the kind of man he was, I guess.
He was. He was an incredible man, an incredible figure to look up to. Growing up, he was we all played sports, and he never tried coaching us in football that I remember, but he would do things with baseball. You go down and play catch with him. He'd throw balls to you. If they needed an umpire, he was the first one to jump up and umpire a game for, and he'd get behind the plate and umpire. Just the fact that he went to all our games as kids, and managed to do the stuff up here for myself, and then still get down to Philly to see Pete and Steve play, and then still spend Sunday up at the Hamburg School with Jonathan. He worked full time until Grace Mines closed. That was his job, and was very proud of it. And even after they offered everybody a chance to go to other spots if they wanted. He opted not to with with the retirement package that they came up with for him.
Right.
But he still, even then after, worked part-time just to fund the trips to either going to reunions or going out to see our brother Pete out in Wyoming, or wherever whatever trip that he and my mom wanted to take. Growing up, I knew he had he had been wounded in the Battle of Bulge. That's where he lost his leg. I found out he had 4 Purple Hearts because he asked me to go get something in his dresser, and in the bottom of his dresser was his 4 Purple Hearts buried in the back. He was a regular guy and didn't want any special recognition, didn't want any, you know, I think it was hard for him, you know, in some ways when the book came out and people start reading about it and knowing, more about it. Than, that's where I learned more about it than anything. Because if he was at the house with either, Major Winters or Bill or Babe, if you walked into the room, they stopped talking. That was not part of
Interesting.
It was not, that was their world. They didn't want, and I equate it to that he didn't want us to have to experience what he experienced. The war was the war, and he compartmentalized it.
All right. So what's on here? You listened to it? You said, right?
Yeah, it's basically Joe doing not even an interview. It was he must have wrote something out, and I think he did it to practice. Like I said, there's a few tapes, and I can't find them, of him at either like at a middle school talking about it, where he went with Major Winters. And I originally thought maybe this was the a tape of the interview of Ambrose, because Joe and Major Winters, they met up at the Midway Diner up on Route 78, and that's where Ambrose came in and talked with them.
Okay.
And did the interviews.
Okay. We don't think that's what this is.
No, I think this is more. I think he and it's just talking. It's about Bastogne.
Okay. All right. Let's take a listen.
October the 8th, 1944. I had been hit in both legs setting up a machine gun position on a dike on the Net Orion. My Corporal James Camel was killed at the same time. I was evacuated from Holland through the British Medical Corps and received very good care. Finally ending up in an American hospital in England. I rejoined my company at Marmelon, France, about 2 weeks before the breakthrough at Bastogne. On the 18th of December 1944, we were ordered to prepare for battle. It was a surprise to all of us because we were not fully supplied with equipment for combat. We were loaded on trucks and headed for the unknown, which turned out to be Bastogne. We arrived in Champs in the early morning of the 19th of December and unloaded from the trucks. My battalion, the 2nd Battalion, was ordered to take a position just north of Bastogne. Later in the morning, we were ordered to Regimental Reserve in Luzeray. On the 20th of December, the 2nd Battalion was committed on a line from a railroad east of Foy to the road that links Bastogne to Foy. From the 20th to the 21st, we stayed on the line, breaking up attacks, running patrols, and setting up outposts. This went on until the 24th of December, when the 2nd Battalion was attacked, but we held the line. On the morning of January the 2nd, we were bombed. I was hit on the right wrist with a piece of tail fin from a bomb. When I removed my overcoat for the medic, the sleeve got caught on the tail fin and pulled it out. I was sent back to the aid station, which was in Bastogne. My wrist was treated, and I spent the night at the aid station. On the morning of January the 3rd of January, 1945, I returned to my battalion CP. I talked to Captain Dick Winters, the battalion commander at this time. Captain Winters told me where I could find Company E. They had been ordered to clean out the pockets of Germans in the front of our lines. I joined them and took over my job as squad leader in the 2nd Platoon. Late afternoon of January the 3rd, 1945, we were ordered back to our original position. It was just getting dark when we took up our position. The Germans opened up on us with their artillery. Since I was squad leader, I had to position my men. That's when I got caught standing up. They always said, if you can hear the shells, you're okay. I did not hear the shell that put my lights out. The last thing I remember was asking if someone could drag me in a hole. Platoon Sergeant Bill Guarnere tried to get me, but did not make it. He lost his leg trying. I lost my leg, wounded in the stomach, chest, and both arms. That was the end of the war for me. The story I'm trying to tell is of Sergeant Bill Guarnere risking his own life to save me from getting hit with more shrapnel. Bill never made it to me, but he tried, and it cost him. This is not a Rambo story. This is what the men of the 101st was made of. One screaming eagle helping another screaming eagle. That's it.
But as you see, the way Joe, that's the way Joe was.
Now we've gone a few miles north of Reading to a town called Laureldale, and we are at Gethsemane Cemetery, and we're here to pay our respects to Joe Toy. His final resting place is just up ahead here. Always nice to see final resting places of veterans well cared for, flags flying here, which is awesome. I'm going to do a little cleanup of the weeds there at the bottom here in a minute. But this is the final resting place of Joseph Toy. Now that I've pulled some of the weeds back, some of the grass, it's not weeds, it's grass. You can see the inscription here. Joseph J, 1919 to 1995. Sergeant, 101st Airborne Division, U.S. Army, World War II. And it is nice to see some people have been here to pay their respects to Sergeant Toy, and we're going to do the same. Leave a penny here on the headstone to show that we were here and pay some respects to this man who I never got to meet, but have a tremendous amount of respect for. I'm sure we all do.